Everyone, in today's video I'm happy to be able to bring you my review of the Zeiss 85mm Batis 1.8 lens. As a portrait photographer, 85mm is a great focal length for me. This one has some brand new added features and I've been lucky to shoot with this for the last couple of months. I've shot over 2,500 frames around the world. Let's take a look at it. Please take a moment and jump over to mattgranger.com. You can see everything that's going on there, all of my latest videos. Up the top you can also see my different download video series, and if you go through to my workshops page, here I've got details of all the different places I'm visiting around the world, my workshops, photo walks, meetups, all kinds of fun stuff. You can also sign up to the mailing list to get all of the latest news as it hits the ground. So as I said, as a portrait photographer, 85 is just a must-have for me. My go-to combo when I'm going to be shooting for high-quality publications like my books is the Nikon D810, and I use the Zeiss Otis 85mm 1.4. An absolute killer combo, but it also kills the bank balance and it's damn heavy. So this guy, the Batis lenses that Zeiss have just brought out, they've brought out a 25 and an 85, and they're full frame. They're to go with the Sony E-mount cameras. Now I don't actually own any E-mount cameras, but I reached out to Sony to get a hold of the A7R and the A7S so I could take them with me on my recent trip to test it all out for a couple of reasons. There are several reasons why these Batises are interesting to me, but I have to say, I don't like the term fanboy, but you could call me a Zeiss fanboy. I think their optics are really unparalleled. The Otis lenses are seriously the best I've ever tested. That includes everything, including $10,000 plus Leica lenses. They're just that good. But for traveling light and traveling and wanting to shoot fast, a big, heavy, expensive manual focus lens is tricky. I took that 85 with me to Peru in 2014. In 2015, I opted for this combo. There aren't that many Zeiss lenses, well there's none really for Nikon out there, that offer autofocus. The only ones are the ones that are designed for mirrorless cameras, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but long story short, Canon and Nikon don't give them licensing to make autofocus lenses. So because this guy is autofocus, it's really interesting. I would love to get a setup that included autofocus Zeiss lenses in it. There's a couple of other things too though. This is an 85 1.8, but it's got built-in image stabilization, and the world's first, it's got an OLED display on it which shows you your depth of field information. Taking a look down on the Otis, this is also showing you a depth of field scale in the old-fashioned way. A lot of lenses had this. So let's say if we focus it here at 1.7 meters, if we were at f16, we're going to have almost 1.5 meters through to 2 meters in sharp focus. If we were focused at 7 meters, we'd have from about 5 meters through to 15 meters. And if we were focused at 15 meters, then we'd have from 7 meters through to infinity. It kind of makes sense, right? But if you're shooting wide open and you're just say shooting a headshot, you may only have 1 centimeter depth of field. So that kind of a scale is really useless. You can't really read it. So this one will give you those 0.1 of a meter increments, which can be handy if you're not 100% familiar with your focal lengths and your aperture and what you're shooting. You might be thinking, oh, I'm shooting, a group from that far away. You glance at your lens and it tells you only have 10 centimeters depth of field. That could be a signal to you that, whoops, I may want to go from 1.8 to f3. So it is a bit of a gimmick, the fact that it's OLED. Zeiss is a bit of an old school manufacturer, so including something so modern may seem odd. But if you use that kind of feature, it can be really, really handy. The big things for this one though are that it's dust and weather resistant, and that it's got the stabilization in there, and that they're touting this as a real pro lineup for mirrorless cameras. Something that I think has been holding back mirrorless is the fact that they don't have really fantastic glass available. So let's take a look at the specs. First thing to note, this is a 1.8, not a 1.4 maximum aperture. It then goes through to f22. Closest focusing is 80 centimeters or 2.6 feet. It's got 11 elements in 8 groups. 3 elements inside are low dispersion. The front filter size is 67 millimeters, so it is, it's not a huge lens. The Nikon 85 1.4 is 77, and the Zeiss 85 1.4 is 86 millimeters. It's 4.1 by 3.2 inches, or just over 10 centimeters by 8 centimeters, and it comes in at 475 grams. It's really, not a huge lens. When you put on a body like this, it does look quite big, but when you compare it to the equivalent, these are both 36 megapixel sensors, these are both 85 millimeter quality optics from Zeiss, you can see it really, there's a huge difference there. Okay, now overall the build quality of this one, I would say you can tell that it and the Otis are related. The focus ring feels vaguely similar. The finish on them looks vaguely similar, but they're not in the same league. It's a beautifully made lens. It's light, but it feels like it's mostly metal construction. But, it's just, you can't compare it. This is like a Maybach or a top of the line luxury car, and this is a very, very nice lens, and it does put most of the things out there to shame, but it's silly to even draw a comparison between the two. Other thing, the Otis has a huge focus throw, fantastic for video. This is focused by wire, so you're moving this thing, but it's not physically moving the elements in the lens. It's talking to the camera, and then the camera's making those adjustments for you. So, for what it is, this for me is a photography lens rather than a videography lens. If you're just doing what I'm doing now, setting up focus and then filming, fine. But if you're going to be wanting to pull focus and stuff, then, it doesn't have an aperture ring on it. You have to do that through the camera, and it's focused by wire. So it's not really set up for that kind of thing. Let's take a look at some images here. As I said, I took thousands of images with this lens, and there will be full samples you can take from mattgranger.com Batis 85. Over there I'll pop the downloads so you can see them, because YouTube obviously compresses these things so much it can be hard to see the real details.
Okay, as we look at these shots I took in Peru and Chile, you want to look at how sharp is it, how's the fall off, how's the bokeh, how's the contrast. I got some really nice shots here, I think. Let's go in closer on some of these. You can see just how soft the background is whilst it's still crazy sharp in the foreground. I shot with some flash. I shot a lot of just outdoors in available light. Now this shot actually is really interesting for me. I'm later going to talk about focus speed, but you can see on this one through the snow, it did manage to get sharp focus. Now, of course, the majority of these have been edited and edited quite a bit, but I will put some, unedited ones up on the website, and these last two that I'm showing here are just out of the camera as well, so you can see what the lens is rendering.
So look, I have to say I was really, really impressed with the optical quality on this. I had tested the A7R before, and whilst I think the sensor's good, it does share a sensor with the Nikon D800, it didn't blow me away, but I think that came down to glass. And yes, you can get adapters like this guy, which will let you use all of your other lenses on there. Generally, to let you use metering, you do pick up focus peaking, all of that, but they're not giving you the autofocus on there. So for me, this is a really big step forward, but focus is still an issue. I find it really hard to compare a top DSLR and lens combo to mirrorless. There's some out there like the Olympus OMD with good glass is really quite quick, but when you're shooting with wide open lenses, this guy, there were times that I struggled with it, I have to be honest. In moving situations like the festival I was up in the Andes shooting, there were times where I struggled with it. Shooting at 1.8 and someone's moving in that, even if it's a quarter of a second it takes to grab focus, then they could have moved through that time. But I really think that actually there's two parts to that, or three parts. One, I'm just impatient and I've gotten used to using the gear that I'm used to using, which is pro level and really, really responsive, but also maybe I'm just a little bit spoiled. Second thing is that it's more the camera, because having used a bunch of different lenses on these cameras, none of them are that fast to focus. So it's hard to isolate which is the camera, which is the lens. But given that they're all quite slow, I think the camera has a big part to do with it. It is generally slower than a DSLR. To turn it on, you're waiting a couple of seconds before you can start shooting. DSLR, you turn it on and it's ready to go, bam, bam, bam. And the third thing is that if I'm shooting with, say, my Nikon 85 1.4G wide open, it's also hideously slow. So 85s in that 1.4, 1.8 realm just aren't hugely fast. But I do think that the Nikon 85 1.8 on a top-end body would be faster than this guy, the Batis 85 on the top-end Sony body. The other thing this one offers is image stabilization. Now, they don't make huge bold claims about how many stops it gives you, and I'd never used an 85 with prime with stabilization, so I didn't know if I'd really need it. Hi, kitty. But I have to say there are times where it can really come in handy. You know, let's say all things being equal, I can't adjust the light. I either need to be shooting at ISO 4000 and 100th of a second with this 85mm, or I could drop my ISO to 2000 and shoot at a 50th of a second. Or if I could go to a 25th, then I could shoot at 1000th of a second, ISO 1000. The image quality I get, if I can get sharp results with it, is going to be much higher quality shooting at the lower ISOs. That's where it can come in handy. So let me show you some different shots I got here. I didn't do it intentionally as a test, but then we can see how it is actually performing.
Now, as I said, I didn't take these shots specifically to test shutter speed, but I think it's telling of, once you're reviewing your shots, what you're comfortable going for. There, an 80th is fairly standard for an 85. There, a 60th, still looking good. Here at 1/40th, that's just using window light, and on an 85mm, that's quite slow. And then here at 1/30th, considering that the Sony A7R has a shutter like a barn door closing, I think that's a pretty good result.
Not bad. Now, one other test I love to do with these kind of things, I've shown you the out of focus areas and how sharp they are, but contrast ratio. I often do this shooting black and white text so you can see the crisp white to black ratio. Let's take a look now.
So this was taken at f1.8 wide open. That's what I'm interested in here. At a portrait lens, you often are going to shoot it down low. Now, you may never have seen results or tests like this before. I think I'm the only one that does it, but going in 100%, you can see the blacks are really crisp, and then the fall off is actual blur. So often wide open, even if you're shooting straight on at the book like this, the blacks won't be perfectly crisp. Here, taking an angular cross section on it though, you can see how the focus really falls away so beautifully, but it is still nice and sharp where it should be.
One other image quality test that I know a lot of people care about is vignetting. So, I haven't met a lens that doesn't vignette, it's just how badly they do it. Let's take a look.
So straight up, there we are at f1.8. It's not terrible, but you can see down both of the two sides, it's quite obvious. Here at f2 already, that's cleaned up quite a bit. At 2.8, really looking good. And here at f4, it's gone. It's not the best performance I've ever seen, but it's pretty good.
Okay, so look, I really think optically this is a stellar performer. For me, it's a lens that really gets me excited. Talking about the price, though, it is $1,200 at Adorama in the States, so it's not, a toy. They're aiming at the pro market. So if we're going to talk about, is this lens worth it to you? I'm sorry, but it's really a question only you can answer. How much is your 85 worth to you? If you are on a tight budget, then it may not be. If you are looking at it just as a travel setup on top of what you already have, it may be hard to justify. But if you are looking to go into mirrorless and you've been waiting, like me, for some really quality lenses to get out there, then absolutely you could be looking at replacing some of your top-end DSLR lenses for something like this to be able to get outstanding performance. To be honest, I thought it would come in at more expensive looking at the Loxia range that are for APS-C mirrorless. The 50mm is $950 and it's manual focus. So this one with the stabilization, with the OLED, with the autofocus, I thought, the premium may have been more. Comparing it, say, to their Otis, that's coming in at $4,500 US, so about a quarter of that. And this guy is coming in at about the same price as their old manual focus 85 1.4, but we do have to keep in mind this is a 1.8. So whilst I can compare it to, say, my Nikon 85 1.4G, which is an outstanding lens, that's $1,700 still, and it's not, a terribly new design. But the Nikon 85 1.8 is only $500. So that's probably the one you want to be comparing to this. That said, the images, I think, speak for themselves. Do jump over to macgranger.com/Batis85 and then you can see them, and I'll put some full high-res ones there that you can download. to look at that haven't even been edited, so you can have a real play with them. For me, it's really, really interesting. I hope they bring out more of these. I would love to be able to really start looking at it. And one final thing on the price is, when you look at these kind of things, me too, because you are making some compromises going to a mirrorless camera, in my opinion, over a DSLR, you are looking at, okay, so whenever there's something that isn't a huge advantage, it's like, oh, so that's just another negative, oh, and then it's a $1,200 lens, oh. But this lens is $1,200, and the new A7R Mark II, which isn't even out yet, is going to be $3,200. So a full combo, that's $4,400. This one's $4,500 just for the lens, no stabilization and no autofocus. So it's certainly an interesting proposition. It's really going to come down to you and how you like to shoot. And I actually am going to do a comparison between these guys, the Otis and the Batis, to see just how close it really is. This lens honestly it just blows away everything that comes along. So sorry Batis, I don't think you stand a chance, but I will be interested to see how does it compare at a quarter of the price with the extra features compared to this guy, which is their absolute flagship. Again, hello kitty cat. So leave me any questions or comments. Please do jump over to mattgranger.com and you can check out everything that I've got going on. Lots of tours to Europe, America, Mongolia, Bhutan, all kinds of interesting places around the world coming up soon. And I'll see you soon with more gear, reviews, and technique videos. Cheers, guys.